Ray Sefo, the legend. Ray, I want to talk about some of your fights in your great legendary history as a fighter. And I also want to find out what it was like growing up in New Zealand. You're a Samoan, I think, right?
Samoan German, yes.
Yeah. So, I want to find out what it was like growing up as a Samoan, German, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I was born and raised in New Zealand, and I come from a big family. I have 7 brothers and 2 sisters, and grew up in a family of boxers. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, cousins, brothers, all used to box. And I had my first boxing club myself and my younger brother, Ronnie, had our first boxing clubs when we were 5 years old. He was 4, actually. And we first started sparring at that age, at 5 or 6 years old. We started sparring with all the cousins because everybody were boxers. And then as a teenager, I started Kung Fu and did that for 6 years, Wing Chun. And went from that to Muay Thai. I've been doing that ever since. And the first time I did anything to do with ground was with Hoist Gracie, who's a good friend of mine. We did, started learning a little bit about jiu-jitsu back then, and in 2008, I met Randy Couture, became good friends, and now and then I started wrestling and understood that part of the game, and which is a very strong part. Jiu-jitsu and wrestling are two strong parts of what MMA is, and so I got to understand the game more and more, and I love it. I coach now, I have been for the past 3 years, and I enjoy it. It's exciting, but also great to understand, because I was probably one of the first people to say, well, what's MMA? It's kind of boring to just kind of sit around on the ground, do nothing, because I come from a striking background. But when I did jiu-jitsu and wrestling and understood how hard it is to even practice that part of the game, and got to understand it better, and had a whole different outlook on what jiu-jitsu and wrestling brings to MMA, and so respect the sport.
We know you're a legendary fighter, and interesting to find out how you progressed in boxing, then you went to Kung Fu and wrestling, MMA. But what is it like in New Zealand? Is New Zealand, where you grew up, is that a rough place? Do people get into fights a lot? Where does the boxing influence come from? Because we don't hear about New Zealand, boxers from New Zealand, we don't hear about that.
Well, New Zealand is a beautiful place to grow up. People are...
Is it like a rough place? People...
No, not really. I mean, listen, anywhere in the world you go, like here in the States, for example, there are parts in America where it's completely just amazingly beautiful, and then there are parts where you go, and if you make a mistake of walking around there at 11 o'clock at night, you're going to either get jumped or get shot.
So it's not just something like people think, oh, New Zealanders, they love to brawl. It's just like a regular place.
Absolutely. I mean, we do love to fight down there. David Tour is probably the most well-known boxer to come out of New Zealand, because he was a bronze medalist in the Olympics, and then he was signed to Ludura. He fought for the title against Lennox Lewis. Jimmy Thunder, who's another Kiwi guy, who also made his mark in the world of boxing. And then you got so many great kickboxing champions to come out of there. And New Zealand's a beautiful place. Again, there's good and bad in every country or any walks of life. So it's no different to the States.
I hear you, Ray. But growing up, were you always this big and strong?
I was always big, and then when I was getting ready to fight for a title, I couldn't fight for the heavyweight title because one of my good friends and teammate was also the heavyweight champion. So I really had to diet, and at that point I was I mean, I had my first fight at 18. So by the time I was 19, I was ready to fight for a national amateur title. So I had to go down in weight to cruiserweight, and fortunately, I was young enough to be able to, diet and have no problem losing weight. It's different today. So I fought at cruiserweight for a while and came up in the rankings.
So you were naturally a big guy, even growing up.
Absolutely. I mean, the heaviest I've been is 275. I never want to be 275 again, but I mean, I walk around now at 255, I like my weight where I am at now.
What do you do besides kickboxing? What are some of your interests, Ray? I mean, kickboxing, MMA. What are some of your other things?
I love to read, and I love to go to movies, hang out with family and friends.
Did you play football growing up? Because they must have recruited you for football, man.
Yeah, we did. Rugby is a national sport in New Zealand, and we just had the sevens. The World Sevens here in Las Vegas. It's been, I think, 3 years in a row now that we've had the sevens here. So, but yeah, we definitely did play football, rugby, growing up.
And I'm sure you would have been offered a scholarship if you were in the U.S. You fought some greats, man. Peter Arts, so many greats. What was it like fighting Hangman Choi? He's got such a big reach, and many people thought he would be unbeatable.
Well, yeah, Hangman Choi is a big guy, very agile for a big guy, but he wasn't going to be quicker than me. And I had to fight a smart game, and I was stick and move and change angles on him. And eventually, it went to a decision. But if it had gone an extra round, it probably would have been stopped, because when I watched the video again, he was already shaking his head. He wasn't going to go another round. That being said, listen, nothing but respect for everybody that steps into that cage or that ring anytime. So, he did great. He did well for such a big guy, and he beat Sammy Schultz. That's huge.
Yeah, Sammy is an unbelievable fighter. What was it like fighting Peter Arts, man? That's something.
Peter Arts is not only a good friend, but he's a legend in the sport, and got nothing but love and respect for that guy. I was just honored to be in the same ring with him. When I look back, I watched K-1 2 years before I was actually contracted to K-1. Peter Arts, Roman Labana, Andy Hook.
You fought Jerome Labana too, man. Wow.
Mike Bernardo. The list goes on. Francisco Filho. And I'm watching television. I'm like, wow. These are the best of the best in the world. Man, I would love to be one of those guys one day. So I just knew I just had to work hard, and I did. And when I was standing in the same arena at the Tokyo Dome, 80,000 people watching, and they call out Nusa Hughes, they call out Peter Arts, and my name was in amongst these great names. And like I said, for me, it was just an honor to be in the ring and the presence of those guys, because they're some of the best fighters in the world.
Is there any particular strategy that you used for, let's say, Hangman Choi?
Yeah, absolutely.
That you didn't use on someone else?
For a big guy like Hangman Choi, I had to stick and move. I'm the type of fighter I like to stand and bang, but he was just too big. I mean, he's 7'2", I believe. He jumped in the ring at 370, I think. I was 235 or 240, and so for me there was no way I was going to move that guy other than landing some big shots, which I did. That being said, I still had to change angles on him and eventually beat him.
Do you feel like continuing your fight career right now, or are you just gonna be a promoter, or what's the story?
No, I love fighting. I love what I do. I'm very passionate about martial arts, and Right now, my goal is to have 7 more fights. I'm at 93 pro fights, and I want to have 7 more pro fights and then hang up the gloves. I've had 3 amateur fights, and right now, I'm still very motivated and still passionate about competing. And like I said, as long as I can get up in the morning and say I still love going to training and come home and then go back in the evening, then I'm still can compete. Until then, when that motivation no longer is there, that's an indication that it's time to hang it up. That being said, I'm not one of these guys that retire and then come back. When I say I'm retired, I'm definitely going to hang it up.
I wonder why there's not more Samoans in MMA, because my sergeant in the Army, Sergeant Diaxon, I never forget, what a powerful dude, man. He played football. He was like a superstar in football, so strong. Why do you think there's not more Samoans in the sport?
I think it's a matter of educating them a little bit more. There is a few. I just met another kid, a young kid out of San Jose, that he's Samoan, and he's had 6 MMA fights. But I think more than anything is educating them about the sport, because I know, being Polynesian and being Samoan, they all like to stand and bang. They want to stand in front of you and knock you out. They don't want to go to the ground and try and submit you. Their mentality is man to man, toe to toe, and knock you out. So, and of course, that's what I thought about MMA in the back in the early '90s. That being said, having to experience jiu-jitsu and wrestling, it ain't easy. Those 2 elements of the game, itself is really hard to learn. And wrestling is so grueling in terms of like constantly, and their mentality is just go, go, go. And so, like I said, it's a matter of educating them, or them going out there and experiencing what wrestling brings to the game and what jiu-jitsu brings to the game of MMA. And then I think they will appreciate it a little bit more.
A lot of strikers think jiu-jitsu guys, when they're on the ground, they're resting. Before you train with Randy and Hoyce, what did you think about people on the ground? They're just taking it easy, wrestling. Resting and just.
Listen, I don't know if I can say this on camera, but I wasn't thinking that they were resting. I was thinking it was too. Not that I'm homophobic or.
You thought it was gay.
Yeah, and of course, I thought that because I didn't understand the game. I didn't know that, the guy on the ground, on the bottom, could twist you up and put you on an arm bar, or turn you around and, sweep you and put you in a rear naked choke, and all that kind of thing. But when I did it and understood it, I had a lot more respect for it, because the ground game is no joke. That's just as dangerous as stand-up. And so, like I said, going back to anybody that doesn't understand the ground game, if you go out there and you experience it, you're going to understand jiu-jitsu and wrestling. Not only is it a huge element of the game, but it ain't easy. It's just as tough as learning to stand.
And Ray, as we finish this, if you weren't fighting, what do you think you'd be doing for a living?
I'd probably be acting. I had always, back when I started modeling when I was 16, and I'd done little parts of TV shows here and there in New Zealand, and I loved that part of of what that entertainment world brought. And so, it's funny because I got called. I had a second call back with an audition for a TV show, which was a major role. And then I get a call, and then I get called to go to Japan to meet with the K-1 president. And so it was a toss-up of what I wanted. And for me, as much as I loved acting, um, I was very passionate. I was really, my passion was the fight game, and now it's one of those things where there's a few projects at hand, and I started my own movie production company 8-9 years ago, and it's just in the last, and you're the first I've ever said this to, just in the last 6 months, things are just falling in place, and there's some big things, some big news coming that way as well.
Which is tougher to compete in, MMA or kickboxing? And which is tougher to train in also?
That's a good question. Speaking to Maurice Smith, who's done both, I've done both, but he says for him, MMA was a lot easier. Kickboxing was way more tougher. I kind of agree to an extent, because for me, finding somebody, whether it be MMA or kickboxing, is still hard. It's still tough. So I've heard from very few, maybe 2 or 3 guys that have come from kickboxing to MMA. They found that MMA was easier on the body than kickboxing is, and
on the body for sure.
Right. To train, I want to say they're just as tough as each other, but MMA, there's more to train. In other words, I find
There's so much to know.
Right. I find it really hard to kind of like. I found that I didn't have enough time during the day to go wrestling, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, MMA.
It's a full-time job, man.
Right, absolutely. So, I really had to reschedule a lot of things so that I could do everything, within that day. That being said, I think they're both great sports. They're both tough, and I nothing but love for the people involved, and of course the sport itself.
And when you mention Maurice Smith had an advantage because Maurice Smith was training Frank Shamrock all the time, so he was always constantly being exposed to MMA. You would have to travel to Randy's or train grappling with Hoyce, so it's different.
Right, no, absolutely. Maurice was very lucky because back in the day, when Maurice was, he had the advantage of stand-up. Nobody, when I say nobody, I mean the MMA stand-up back then was nowhere near to the MMA stand-up today. And this is the great thing about our sport is that mixed martial arts just keeps evolving, and the fighters get better, and they're going to get better and better and better, and this sport is going to continue growing for the next 40, 50 years to come because it's the fastest growing sport in the world right now.
And you have good takedown defense. And back in the day, Maurice Smith and Bas Rutten were the only strikers able to really be successful in MMA because they had such great takedown defense. And that, I think, is a feature that you have.
Well, that's right. I mean, that's for any stand-up guy. That's the first thing you learn is sprawl.
But most of the strikers would get taken down. Maurice Smith and Bas Rutten learned how to prevent it.
Right. I mean, Bas Rutten is a legend. Excuse me. He's such a great fighter. And again, the sport has evolved so much as well, and it's so good to see him still involved and having his own gym, and he's evolving as he trains and as he coaches with the sport. And so, I mean, Maurice. Bas Rutten is nothing but a great champion and an icon in the world of mixed martial arts.
You made a lot of good friends in the sport. It's like a brotherhood, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've met a lot of great people in this sport, and listen, I get along with everybody, and there's so many. Growing up, a lot of people, society, if you will, will label us, kickboxers, boxers, mixed martial artists as a thug sport. Well, over time we've proven that there's a lot of intelligent people, and I saw this interview with Dana White and Lorenzo Vachita where they was saying that 70 or 80% of mixed martial artists today are college graduates. So, right there is telling you that we have evolved as athletes, as people, as the sport, and again to prove to the world that mixed martial artists or anyone in martial arts are just as smart as anybody else out there. So we keep doing what we do, and we love what we do, and fingers crossed that the sport keeps growing and gets better and better and bigger and bigger.
I'm with you on that, Ray, and I got to say, 99% of them win with honor and lose with dignity. So there's a lot of honor, man. Good people. Ray Sefo, thank you, brother.
Appreciate it. Thank you.